Hey, welcome to another one of our videos. Hopefully you've scanned the QR code on the homework and you've gotten through to this video and you're ready to learn about this week's spelling focus. This week's spelling focus is all on the suffix airy, A-R-Y or airy, A-R-Y, E-R-Y or O-R-Y. We're going to get into it. It can be a little bit tricky. I know even as an adult sometimes I make a mistake with this one and I have to think quite a lot about what the suffix might be, but I'm going to try and give you some good little tips and tricks on how you might be able to know next time you get through to a word like that, which one you could choose. So let's get started. Like I said, the suffix for this week focus is airy, A-R-Y, E-R-Y, and O-R-Y. And these suffix graphemes can be very difficult because they often sound the same, or they sound like a schwa, or us in our country, we don't say the word properly, and we just say, sometimes we don't even say the A sound, we just say re, which we'll get to later. But like I said, we can usually use a few clues to determine which of these suffixes should be used. Let's get started with our first one. With our first one, we have words with ERY. Now, words with ERY, one of the best ways I have for finding these ones is these words can often make another word with just an sound. Like, you know how we have the word like faster, stronger, longer. We can often make the suffix with a lot of these words before you could even add a Y on the end. So if you think of a word like archery, where you're shooting bows and arrows. With the word archery, we could already make the word archer. That's what we call someone who, the person's job it is to do archery. They're called an archer. So you can see they've already got that ERY word in there. If you look at the word jewelry, in the word jewelry, it has an ERY suffix, but you can also see if you worked in a jewelry store, you're called a jeweler, right? So it already has the word ER on there. And what we know about English spelling is they don't like to change rules like that. If it already has an ER with one word, they're unlikely to change it for another word. If you take a word like imagery, so like when you're using imagery, there's no such word as imager, but there is a word with image already with an E on it. So if they already has an E on the end, they're probably going to want to use the initial E that already was on the word image. So imagery would be with an E. Just like the word scenery, the landscape had some really nice scenery. There's already a word called scene. So like I guess if you had like a movie scene, it already has an E on the end. Now I get you'd probably be dropping the E, but if the E is already there on the word, they're probably going to go with the ERY sound anyway. Maybe a word like battery. Oops. There is a word called batter. So battery looks like that. Now you can already see my problem I said before, which is that we don't say the word battery. Quite often when you hear us speak, we'll say the word like this, battery, right? We don't say, maybe not that extreme, but we don't say the word battery, right? Or even imagery, we quite often just say imagery. We say the imagery. It's like it's like an sound, right? Imagery, so the schwa sound instead of imagery, which makes sense, right? Imagery doesn't really make sense. So my rule for the ERY suffix is quite often words that either have an E on the end or can be made into a word that already would have ER on it. Our next suffix list is usually words that have ARY. These words, quite often you'll see, have the sound airy in them. Not always, but if you say them properly, they should say airy instead of uri. So in a lot of the other words, you'll see the sound with that sound will make, which I call a schwa, it'll make a sound look like this, image uri, right? But with our AR words, quite often you'll hear they have a different sound in them. Now, I know we say the word dictionary, but if we say it properly, it's dictionary, right? Or if we say the word like ordinary, you might hear some people say ordinary. I get it. It's because we say words, not necessarily how we spell them. We hear this imagery, ordinary. But if we say the word properly, ordinary, you'll hear this air sound instead of a schwa sound. Like the word library is another example of that. How often do you hear people say library? They just completely skip the whole word. They say library. But the word's library, and in the library, the end suffix actually has that air sound. Like the word temporary, if something wasn't going for a long time, it might just be temporary. We have ARY because you can hear the air sound in there. Another word might be boundary or secretary. The word that, when I was thinking about this, that doesn't really work like that. Summary. Okay, I get it. It's a bit of a tricky one because it doesn't really have the air sound. It's not summary. And even if you had a longer word like summarize, it doesn't really become easier. But if you hear the word, another word with that would be summation. There's another word like if the in summation, like if you're summarizing it. But when you say that word, obviously you hear the A sound there. So quite often in the initial word, you don't hear the A sound. But when you make other words from it, you'll hear it there. But so remember, the ARY quite often makes the airy sound when you say it properly. This is why it's really important to know how to pronounce words properly, even if you don't say them properly all the time. And the last one is the ORY words. Similar to the ERY words, quite often you do have words that can just have an OR suffix at the end. I was thinking of a word that would work with this one. I was thinking like the word director. Sorry. If you were making a movie, you're called the director. It already has an OR sound. So when you have a word like, many of you probably wouldn't know this word because you've grown up with Google Maps, but when I was young, there was a book that used to sort of show you where to go with directions, and it was called a street directory. And with directory, it would have ORY because it can already have the word OR, direct or with an OR. I'm trying to be another word that might work with. Let's try the word predator. There's a word called predatory, right? With a word called predatory behavior. It's like when the animal is exhibiting behaviors that feel like a predator, but we can already have the word predator in there already with an OR sound. But I was thinking about a few words that might work differently to that, and I was thinking about the words victory, which is annoying because once again we say victory quite often, and also the word history, and maybe the word memory. Now, there's no word called memor or histor, or I mean, maybe not really, but victor. But the way that I was thinking about these words and how you would know it is sometimes if you were thinking about it, think about other words that can come from the word hist, like history, right? And quite often you'll come up with a word that you'll hear the O sound in it, and you'll know that it doesn't make the other one. So I was thinking about the word, sorry about the handwriting, it's hard to write with an Apple pen, historical. Now, maybe in history we hear a schwa sound like history, but when we say the word historical, we can hear the o. Just like the word victory, we hear that schwa sound with the victory. But when we say the word like victorious, you'll hear the O sound. And like I said to you, the English language quite often doesn't want to change those words around and mix around. So if it sticks with one with the O sound, it's going to stick with it for all of them. Same the word memory, it has that schwa sound, that memory. But if you had the word that comes from memory, like a memorial to remember people by, you'll see that memorial will have that O sound, memor. So with the O sounds, quite often, if you think about other words that can make, it does actually say that OR sound instead of a schwa sound. And also with the OR sound, you'll quite often see words that do have an OR sound in there. Basically, you can make a word with OR in it as well. So if we look back, we have our ER words, ARY words, and ORY words. With these words, I would be looking for words that can also end in just ER, or you can hear the sound. With the ARY sounds, quite often, if you say them properly, they're like an airy sound. And with ORY words can often end in OR, or when you look at other words from the base, you'll actually hear the OR sound instead of a schwa sound. I hope that's helped somewhat, and I'm going to put some stuff in from the homework to see if you can sort of organize the words into different categories. Let me know if that's helped. If you want me to change my videos around or make them different or make them more funny, I'm happy to give it a go, but thanks for watching.